Hi, my name is Yash Chavan and I'm going to present to you the solution for the problem statement 1 of Techsurf 2025, which is Chat Agent SDK for developers. And as the tagline says, custom chat agents in minutes. So the whole idea is that developers face a lot of problems in integrating chatbots with their existing websites. They have to write the front end, back end, also configure the APIs, the LLM models, etc. But not anymore. So presenting to you Chat Agent SDK, which will make it easy to integrate Chat Agent into any of your websites. So the steps are simply install the SDK, import it, configure it according to your needs, and that's it. The Chat Agent is ready. So this is the Contentstack website in which I have a stack named as blog website. And if I click on E, which takes me to the entries, so there are a bunch of entries here. Okay, so these are the entries, and also the website to which we are going to add the chat agent. It is hosted on launch, so let's have a look at that as well. So if I go to launch here, then I would see my blog website. So if I simply just click on open website, and as you can see that this is the website that we are going to add our chat agent to, and there are some pages like this is the home page, then also there is the about page. Okay, then also there is the contact us page, and finally there is a blog section as well where there are multiple blogs that are written. So this is that section, and if I click on a particular blog, then I can read that particular blog as well. Also each blog has a related posts as well, so we can click on that and read them as well. So this is the overall website to which we are going to add the chat agent. So let's start doing that. So the code for this website, I have already opened it into the VS Code. Okay, so this is the blog website that we have. So let's now run this particular website. So now in order to integrate the chat agent, I have created a documentation for the developers which would help them in integrating the chat agent easily. They have each and everything related to the chat agent into this documentation. So this is the brief overview of what is the platform and how it works. But we are interested in installing the package and use the chat agent. So let's here click on installation. And now we are to the installation page. Here are some steps given, so we are going to follow them one by one, and trust me, they are simple steps which anyone can follow, and the chat agent will be integrated easily just in a few minutes. So the first step is running the following command. So I would just simply copy it and go to my terminal. I would just close this localhost server, and now I would just simply paste this command, which is installing the package that we have, CMS Chat Agent SDK, and also I would add the latest so that we get the latest updates for the package if any. So the package is installing. So the package is now installed. Now we would follow the next step. So after the package is installed, we would simply go to the next step, which is configuring the SDK into our project. So we have to add this script in our index.html as the instructions say. So what I would do is I would just go to my index.html file. Okay, and here we have to add that script, and here there is a demonstration as well as where we have to add it. So it is just above the title. So this is the title, and I would just add the script here. Okay, now let's move on to the next step. We have to integrate the chat agent. So we have to first import the required libraries. So I would just go to the app.tsx, come here and import the necessary libraries and functions that are needed. That we have to wrap the app component with the chat agent provider. So this is the chat agent provider that we have. So I would just go inside this div, and then I would paste this, and also the same thing for this. So let's move to the next step, which is set the configuration and add the chat agent. So as you can see that we are following the documentation that I've added. I have to just set this chat config. So I would just come here and then paste this. Okay, and finally I have to just add this chat agent as well. So let's go to the bottom after the routes and just paste this. Okay, so now we have followed all the steps, and then we have to test the application, run the application and check whether we can see the chat agent on the website. So npm run dev. Yes, so we can see the chat agent icon here at the bottom. If I click on that, then we can see that the chat agent has been integrated successfully. Now we are moving to the next step. Now we have to configure the backend so that we can get responses from the Contentstack data that is powering this website. So let's go to the backend integration here, and these are the steps. They are also simple steps. So a few steps for the front end embedding and a few steps for configuring the backend. So we have to go to the following URL. So this is the environment configuration URL that we have, and here we have to fill this basic details so that our backend environment is configured. So as we are using LLM for generating the responses, so we have to put the provider. There are various providers given here. So let's say we select Google Gemini, and then we have to put the model here. So now a common question that may come to our mind is that here we are configuring the environment. So if we want to change the LLM provider or the model, then do we have to fill this environment configuration again and again? So the answer is no. This is just for the base environment configuration, but if you want to toggle between the models, then that can be done using just the front end, using the query parameters, which we will discuss later. So for now, we will select the model. So if I just start typing, I will get the recommendations. If I want the Gemini 2.5 Flash, I will just click on it. Now I have to put the Gemini API key. So here I have to fill the Contentstack keys and information. So I will just quickly do that. And finally the MCP groups in which I can give options for the MCP server. So now before just clicking on save, I will just turn on my backend so that we can see the live logs of the changes that are happening. So this is the backend, which is LLM API services. And as I'm using Redis as well for caching and optimizing the response time. So I would just quickly ping the Redis client as well. So I would just go to Redis CLI, and yes, I can see the port and the local host. And now I would start the backend. So npm run dev, and the backend would start. It would take some time as it is connecting to the MCP server, the Redis client. So now as you can see that here we have the logs as Redis client is connected, and also it is connecting to the MCP server. And yes, so now it is successfully running on localhost 3000. So what we would do is we would come here and we would click on save configuration. It would give me a confirmation message. I would simply click on continue. Now this is the API key which we will be using for making the request from the front end. But we have to not write any request code. We have to just put the API key into the chat config that we have, which we will do later. So I will just quickly copy this API key and I will just save the configuration, and here I get a message as configuration saved successfully. So if I click on OK, this gets refreshed, and in the backend here we can see that environment configuration updated successfully. So we get all the logs so that we can monitor what is happening. So now that we have done the configuration, let's get back to the documentation. So yes, we have done all these steps. Okay, so after doing this, what we have to do is we have to add the API key to your .env file into the front end. I would go to the app.tsx, and in this config, instead of this your API key, I would put the API key that I've copied, and you can simply create an environment variable and do the same. But for simplicity, I'm just pasting it here. Okay, so now let's go to our website, click on this chat icon, and let's type something. Let's say, hi, can you get me the latest blog? And if I hit enter, then it is typing. And yes, the latest blog is the romance of food, culture and history, and the URL is also given. Let's check in our entries whether the response is correct. So the latest blog is yes, the romance of the food. Let's try something else. Here there is a blog for Apple AirPods Pro 3. So let's ask it, is there a blog on Apple AirPods? Hit enter. Let's see if it gives the correct response. And yes, there is a blog, AirPods 3, still worth the hype. URL is also given. And one important thing, like it can also answer some vague questions, like for suppose on this contact page there is some information that I have to fill. So if I just ask my chat agent like is there anything I need to fill on the contact, and it would understand what am I trying to ask and it would give me the response. And yes, it is giving me name, email and message. Okay, so it is correct as you can see behind name, email and message. Also I can ask like, is there any location given? So is there any location on that page? And that refers to the contact page, but before we have asked about the contact page, so it would get the context and it would answer accordingly. So it has the history and the memory which I just mentioned. So yeah, yes, there is a location, San Francisco headquarters. Let's check whether it is correct. San Francisco headquarters. So the chat agent has the context of what we are asking and it responds accordingly. So now we have tested the chat agent onto our localhost. Let's do one thing. Let's go to this. Let's turn it off. And we have to push this code onto the GitHub so that the launch will redeploy this website. And now we can test the chatbot from the website live. So let's do git add, git commit, chat agent embedded successfully, and git push. And yes, the code is pushed to the GitHub. So if I go to launch now, which is this, and if I click on the blog website, and I have two environments, so this is the environment of the deploy, And as you can see that it is deploying the latest commit that I made, and yes, successfully our site is live. So let's check. Okay, so we can see the chat icon here. So let's say if I ask, is there a blog for LA? If I go to entries and if I go, this is the blog, yes, the Asian escape from LA to Tokyo. Let's check if it gives the right answer, and yes, it is giving the right answer. And also quick note that this good evening is basically taking the current time, so I'm recording this video in the evening.
More example queries.
So now that I've explained the complete flow on the developer side, embedding the chat agent, also connecting and configuring the backend, and then making the website live and testing it. So we have done all the things. Now I would go on and explain you the features that the chat agent has for the user side. So for the features on the user side, he can basically save a particular response. So let me show you a demonstration that if I ask, what is the mission of the website? Okay, so we have got the response. Now if the user wants to save this particular response, he can simply go to this icon and he can click it, and he will get a response as message is saved. So now here is the saved messages part, and if he clicks on this section, then he can see all the saved messages. Okay, he can also delete one, or he can get back to the chat and he can chat regularly. Another feature is that the user can give a voice input to the chat agent. So if I click on this icon, give me some tech related blog titles. And if I click on send, one important thing to notice is that the response that we are getting isn't streams. So this is the streaming response that we have got. So these are some blogs that are related to tech, okay, so variables and all. So as the user can give a voice input, he can also listen back the output. So if I click on this play icon, he can listen back the response as well from the chat agent. So if I click on this.
Okay, drawing inspiration from Curiosity Corner's mission to make the world more interesting. Here are some tech-related blog titles designed to spark curiosity. Exploring new tech and trends. 1. Beyond the buzzwords.
Another helpful feature is that there is a delete icon here. So after clicking on this delete icon, the chat will be cleared, and now the user can have a fresh chat with the chat agent. So now let's have a look at the features which are helpful for the developers. So now if I click on this chat icon, you can see that this particular chat agent is in a dark mode, but the website behind is in light mode. So if I want to convert this particular chat agent into light mode, do I have to configure it and write CSS for it? The answer is no. You may notice that the thing that we imported here, in this there are two things that we imported. First is dark chat config, and the next one is light chat config. We can go to the chat config and we can change this particular value. So if I put light chat config here, and if I just save it, magically you can see that the chat agent is converted to the light theme. Now if I go back to the documentation, here there is a section known as customization. So these customizations are for the developers. So let's have a look at agent metadata. So the name of the chat agent can also be modified. So no need to find where we have to change it. We have to simply take this bot name and we have to change the name to Curiosity Corner Agent. And if we save and go to the website, you can see that the agent name is successfully changed. So now I want to draw your attention to this new features section. Then there is also a feature of rate limiting. So for suppose that you have to set a particular rate, let's say 5 messages from the user, in order to protect your APIs and the number of requests that the user is sending. So for that you can have this rate limiting. So let me show you the rate limiting thing. So if I just come to this chat config, and if I put another value here which is message limit, and if I put it let's say 2. So if I click here and if I say let's say hi, so it would give me a response like how can I help you and stuff. Okay, so hi there, how can I help you? Again if I send hi and if I hit enter, then it would tell me that you have reached the maximum number of messages allowed. It has basically restricted me from sending any other messages. So this rate limit would work for let's say 24 hours, and after 24 hours this rate limit would go. So even after refresh, this rate limit persists. Okay, so the rate limit is still there. So the chat agent basically supports streaming response. in which the message is not coming all at once, it is coming in chunks, but not like the developer cannot use the chat response. There is also a support for the chat response as well. The developer can use any of these, but by default the streaming response is enabled. So with respect to the customization, one last feature for the developer is that he can also customize the color theme of the particular chat agent. Like for suppose that I want to put the primary color as this. So if I just save it, the primary color changes to that. If I want to change it, then I can change it as well. So if I go here and change it, then the theme is changed as well. So according to the theme of the website, the theme of the chat agent can also be modified. Also in the problem statement, it was mentioned that the developer should be able to use hooks with the chat agent. So here I have also given the 2 examples, but there can be much more that can be used for using the chat agent with respect to the hooks. So it can be a possibility that the developer already has a button in the navbar which toggles between dark and light mode. And now after he adds this chat agent, he wants that this chat agent should also change the theme according to the button that I click in the navbar. So this is a clear use case. So this button is basically the one which is in the navbar and which is already written by the developer. So let's say I copy this and I let's say put it into this, and it needs to be formatted. Okay, so this is the button that I have and it has a toggle. And now I would just simply copy this thing and I would replace this particular thing. Okay, and this needs to come above this. We can just simply take this and remove it. Okay, simply we have a state. Okay, then we have the chat config which is configured according to the dark and light mode. We have a toggle function which simply toggles between the dark and light mode, and we have a button here. So if we now go to the website, here we have a toggle dark mode button, and this is the chat agent. So if I now click on this, then you can see that it automatically turns to dark mode. Also there is an example with the user ID. So basically if a particular user is logged in, then you can customize the chat agent by giving its name to the chat agent, like here good evening user. So those are the overall features of the developers. So now I would explain you my entire backend approach and how the backend is working. So this is the architecture overview. So the front-end SDK that we are using, basically the chat agent will make a request, okay, and this request will be first processed by the middleware. So as you can see that here the API key validation is getting performed, then it goes to the backend server. This backend server basically has access to the MCP server and also some LLM services. So this is a diagram that I have prepared for explaining the working. So as you can see that this is the URL that is being used for making the backend API request. You can pass the provider and the model through query params. Also we have the headers in which we have the X API key, and then this is the structure of the message that we give. So this is the message, and also we have some session ID. When this front-end request goes to the backend, the provider and the model that we have, according to that, the LLM services will go forward and use that particular LLM. So now once we have the LLM model will have some steps to perform. First of all, it will detect the intent. So if I'm just asking like hi or hi, can you help me? Then it will detect the intent as conversational. It will send the response directly to the front end. So a streaming response will be sent to the front end. So if I ask like, can you give me the latest blog or can you give me the latest 3 entries? So the data query will be the intent and that flow will start. Here I'm using Redis. So as the backend also has the connect to the MCP server, there are some tools that this MCP has. This get all content types is the first step if we want to generate any response. But every time making this tool call is a bit time consuming. So for that, this Redis is used. It will check in memory whether the get all content types is there or not. So if it's the first time, then it will obviously get a cache miss, and so it will call the MCP server. But if it is for the second time or the third time, then instead of calling the get all content types again, it will simply have a cache hit. It will take the content types and it will generate the response. And this particular step is basically 4 to 5 seconds faster. So this is the overall working flow of the backend, and this is my basically the folder structure. Also there is a API folder in which I have the controllers, middlewares, routes and services. So the code for all the LLM services has been already written, and the user from the front end can toggle between the LLMs automatically. And there is also one important service which is this logger services.
Realtime Logs.
So this is the Postman that I've opened here, and this is basically the terminal in which we will be seeing the log so that it is easier to understand what is actually happening. And in the params we are going to put 2 things. And now here you can see that the provider and the model is there in the request. Now let's click on send. So when I click on send here, basically the connection is made with the backend. Then the events start coming. So server side events start coming one by one in the form of chunks. And once we get the details, then we basically start to get chunks. So these chunks are basically the message or the response that we have to show to the front end via the chat agent. So there are multiple chunks that we get, and at the end the event is end and the connection is closed. Now one thing here to note is, because this was the first request, it got a cache miss for the key. What if I put some different message like what is in the about page, and if I hit send, then for the next time it will be a cache hit here. So if I click send here, again the same process will go on, and as you can see that here cache hit for the key content types. So for the front end side, for toggling between the LLM models, just the developer has to modify this chat config. So in the chat config I can simply write as provider as OpenAI, and I can put model as chat or GPT-5, and this particular provider and model will be used for generating the response. So I hope that I was able to explain you about my thought process and the overall approach of the backend working.